Wonderful. And please welcome Heidi. So those of you who know her work well. She's been at ASU and involved in that program for a while and is involved now in a really exciting project of exploring the national parks through a biomimicry lens. So I'm gonna give her a minute. She's got slides and things ready, so we'll give her a minute to get that stuff together. By way of other introduction, say we've been working on this. This live event is actually culminating work that we've been doing to build new content on Ask Nature with Heidi through the National Parks project. So she's been exploring multiple parks through this lens and putting together this content in a way that we can share on Ask Nature in individual strategy pages and in beautiful kind of collection essays that look at the whole story of these parks. So she's going to take us into that world today, and we'll get to explore that. And we'll even be able to give you, as Hive members, a preview of this work in progress and see, kind of get some early feedback on it and see what you'd like to see from this. And without further ado, Heidi, just say hello. Let me know if we need to do some more tech walkthrough. Easy enough.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. We need to share the screen.
Okay.
Sharing is, you should be able to share. I've got the settings all set up there.
Okay.
Yep. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see like a heart and a hand, and then there's a little yes.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We see it. You did it.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's been a long and winding road to get here today, everyone. Thanks to all of you in Zoomlandia for joining and for also hanging in there while we try to work out some of these technical snafus. And thank you, Andrew, for being so patient for the last hour working through this. I am so delighted to be here today to talk about two of my passions, which is life-centered design and our public lands and waters. For the last couple years, I've been working on combining these two interests in a project called Wild Ideas. So the project involves research travel to 18 sites around the US for a book that I'm writing. The sites are as diverse as Isle Royale National Park, Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, and Joshua Tree National Park. And I'm also organizing a series of residential workshops that are focused on the biomimicry of our country's natural heritage. And this week, as Andrew mentioned, I have partnered with AskNature.org to inaugurate the first in a series of ongoing series of lyrical essays that profile organisms and systems in our national parks, forests, lake shores, and marine sanctuaries. And as Andrew mentioned, the first installment will be available soon. So please check it out and let us know what you think. So today I wanted to talk a bit about the project's origin story before briefly describing the special opportunities that our public lands and waters provide for life-centered design. I'll end with an example from one of the national parks near my home in Phoenix. So first, some background. I want to go all the way back to 2007 when I initiated the first educational programming in biomimicry at Arizona State University. At that time, we integrated biology into a program called Innovation Space in ASU's design school. So Innovation Space was a transdisciplinary product development program that brought together senior level students in product design, graphic design, business, engineering, and sustainability. To help develop curricula and work with us in the classroom, we added a very talented PhD student in biology to our transdisciplinary faculty team. And in time, biomimicry jumped the boundaries of innovation space to include students more broadly in the design school, such as architecture and urban design. Those were really heady times for us in the design school. We were super stoked about exploring the ways in which the more than human world could change the way we taught and practiced design. But something was missing. Most of our students explored biologically inspired design solutions to their challenges by using keyboard ecology. That is, they learned about organisms and natural systems primarily via computer screens. Now, just to be clear, there are some amazing resources online, like nature videos, photography, academic journal articles, and popular science stories. And of course, AskNature.org. What was missing, though, was context. And I became increasingly aware, excuse me, I became increasingly aware of the importance of context after starting what became a near annual ritual for me, which was a solo hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon at the winter solstice. A personal loss that upended my life had turned the holidays into a long season of protracted dread. So my goal was to get as far away from holiday cheer as possible. And hiking a mile down into the earth to bedrock that was more than 1.5 billion years old gave me the perspective I couldn't find in the rim world. So I took my 11th hike this past December, and not much about my ritual has changed in all these years. I routinely spend about 4 days at the bottom of the canyon, and people often ask me what I do alone with such an abundance of time. There's no Wi-Fi, no shopping, not unless buying anti-diarrhea meds at Phantom Ranch Canteen counts as shopping. I tell them I go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon to learn how to be a good animal. So most days I pace the trail above Bright Angel Creek as the walls of the canyon press in on both sides. I do a lot of looking, smelling, touching, listening, noting the particulars of the world around me. I give myself over to what Barbara Kingsolver calls, quote, the subterranean ebb and flow of being alive among the living. So among the amazing organisms I routinely meet are birds such as this American dipper. These cold, hardy little birds venture into rushing streams to glean insect larvae from the rocks, often diving into the froth to pluck tidbits from boulders. Watching them fetch dinner is the canyon's version of must-see TV. Or this acacia plant, appropriately named Wait a Minute bush. And wait, I do. Coming and going on the trail, I stop to admire the plant's main stem that grows nearly horizontal from what looks like sheer rock. What would an architect or structural engineer, I often ask, say about its daring cantilevered reach toward the wedge of sunlight overhead? Or insects like this mayfly? I've been in the canyon when scores of these insects emerge as adults from the creek and take to the air in mating swarms. Individuals barrel up into the sky, then they spread their wings and fork tails to slow their free fall descent. The slant of the winter sun illuminates their translucent bodies so that they glow. The swirl of their mating dance is like a gentle snow. So we know from recent research that this kind of being alive among the living has numerous profound benefits. It has been shown to strengthen immune function, lower blood pressure, increase attention, and reduce stress, among many other benefits. And it's especially good news for practicing professionals of all stripes. Being alive among the living taps into a wide array of positive emotions: love of learning, curiosity, joy, humor, and awe. Positive emotions, especially awe, actually create the conditions conducive to innovation. So research by Berkeley psychology professor Dr. Keltner and other colleagues have demonstrated that the experience of awe makes us more open to new ideas, more generous, more willing to connect, to help others, to collaborate. So I was eager to give our students an experience like the one I was having every year in the Grand Canyon. I got my chance in 2011 when we launched our first traveling studio in biomimicry in the design school. Our class of student designers and architects collaborated with the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama to design products and shelter for rainforest researchers using strategies inspired by nature. So we moved from keyboard ecology to field ecology. We paced the rainforest daily with our noses to the ground and climbed scaffolding up into the tree canopy. We walked to a pond nightly to hear frogs bleating and beeping like machines in a video arcade. Each morning, we watched red-lored Amazon parrots gather in flocks on their commute to the jungle for the day. And every evening, we watched them fly home to our little town to roost. Though the sample size is small and the evidence is anecdotal, I believe that leaving their keyboards behind and spending time alive among the living increased the level of engagement that students had with their work and with each other. You can see it in their faces: curiosity, joy, humor, awe. And to boot, I got a chance to actually shake hands with a sloth, and it wasn't until I saw this picture that I realized the sloth and I probably share the same hairstylist. I would also argue that field ecology increased the originality of their design solutions. So take the design of the bat umbrella by Clint Pennick, one of the students on the trip. He was one of our biology students. So most afternoons during our time in the rainforest, the sky would open up and dump a few buckets of rain. So we always kept umbrellas in our backpacks. They were compact and lightweight, but the problem was they didn't hold up well to gusts of wind. Clint noticed some similarities between bat wings and umbrellas. They both had these large membranes stretched across a scaffolding of thin ribs or struts. But bat wings didn't turn inside out in the wind. So he asked, could bat wings inspire a way to design sturdier umbrellas? So Clint noticed two things. First, the joints and the finger bones in the bat wings. Yes, bat wings are modified hands with a membrane stretched across them. They were slightly offset rather than regularly spaced. So if a heavy gust hyperextended one joint, the neighboring joints buffered the force by bending to an offset degree, thereby strengthening the entire wing. So Clint's design took a similar approach in which each umbrella strut is turned to a slightly different angle from its neighbor to balance the tension and make the overall structure resistant to turning inside out. The second insight was that he discovered that the shape of the bat's finger bones changed across their length. If you took a cross-section of the bone, you'd find that it's oval-shaped at the wrist, which gives the bone extra strength. But at the tips, the bone became more circular, which makes it more flexible and better able to shed gusts of wind. So as biomimicry students and practitioners, we don't have to travel to exotic locales to experience being alive among the living. The US has a vast complex of public lands and waters with high levels of functional integrity. By that, I mean places where plants and animals can largely go about their business with minimal interference by humans. Our vast network of national parks, national forests, marine and freshwater preserves form a creative commons of inspiration for sustainable innovation. Together, they span 6 biomes: forests, marine systems, freshwater systems, grasslands, tundra, and deserts. Many of them come with a decades-long repository of scientific research and on-site interpreters with intimate knowledge of place throughout many seasons and conditions. So I want to conclude with a brief discussion of one such place, Saguaro National Park, about 90 miles from my home in Phoenix. The park lies in the heart of the Sonoran Desert, a 100,000 square mile ecological province that sprawls across parts of Arizona, California, and Mexico. The desert is often depicted as a place of menace and deprivation, and why not? Rainfall is sparse and episodic. Saguaro National Park, for example, receives about 12 inches of annual precipitation. Compare that to 32 inches in Minneapolis or 37 inches in Seattle. Sparse rainfall means that the soil doesn't support big populations of decomposer bacteria and fungi. As a result, soils are nutrient poor, containing on average less than 1% organic matter. Compare that to a good garden soil that ranges between 25 to 50% organic matter. And then there are the wide swings of temperatures that range from 120 degrees in the middle of summer to below freezing in winter. So you kind of understand why deserts have come to be seen as places of menace and deprivation. The interesting thing to me, though, is that Saguaro National Park hosts some of the densest populations of saguaros in the Sonoran Desert. So these immense cactuses often cover whole hillsides like matchsticks, creating what some have called saguaro forests. But as you stand at the base of one of these hillsides, you can't help but ask, how can a place that receives an average of 12 inches of annual rainfall support such majestic multitudes? And that is just the start. In addition to saguaros, the park hosts more than 3,500 species of plants, some 70 species of mammals, 200 species of birds, 50 species of reptiles, and thousands of species of invertebrates. So how can a place that we think looks like this look like this? So the desert uses a whole array of strategies to create abundance from scarcity. And I'd like to end by discussing just one of these, and that is forming mutually beneficial relationships, or what I call forming coalitions of the living. So take, for example, the keystone relationship between leguminous trees and rhizobial bacteria. Most people don't know, but that the Sonoran Desert is known as an arboreal desert. Trees such as Palo Verde in the image that you see on your screen, mesquite, ironwood, and hackberry abound. The majority of trees in the deserts are legumes. They thrive because they formed a partnership that allows them to create their own on-site nitrogen factory. So as many of you know, there is abundant nitrogen in the air, but not in a form that plants can use. Legumes have nodules on their roots, and inside are bacteria that can fix nitrogen and make it available to the plants in exchange for carbohydrates from photosynthesis. This is the shorthand version of the story. But there's an amazing backstory. In the desert, these rhizobial bacteria can live alone in the soil, but when leguminous plants encounter low nitrogen conditions and want to establish a symbiotic relationship, they send out a chemical invitation to the rhizobial bacteria to come colonize their roots. The bacteria send out a chemical RSVP that causes nodules to form on the roots of the trees. The rhizobial bacteria then occupy these nodules, and the beneficial partnership begins. But the story doesn't end there. This fundamental symbiosis has a multiplier effect, and it is critical to the biodiversity of the desert. Leguminous trees, including this Palo Verde tree, serve as nurse plants. They play a critical role for more than 500 species of plants and animals in the desert. Their presence increases the number of bird species by 63%. They provide enhanced moisture and nutrients such as nitrogen, refuge from UV light, grazers, and freezing temperatures. Their shelter and canopies are especially critical to the establishment of saguaros, which rarely germinate and thrive in the open.
Into the mudroom.
So plants and animals in the Sonoran Desert have coped with extremes of hot, dry, and nutrient-poor conditions for millennia. Together, they've leveraged scarcity to produce abundance and tapped the power of limits to create one of the most biologically rich deserts in the world. The question is, how do they do it? And how can we mimic successful strategies like forming coalitions of the living in designs that will help us flourish in our own hotter, drier, and resource poor future? So thank you very much. I'd love to have a conversation with you if anyone has questions.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. And you can unshare your screen now.
What?
That's great. And welcome. I know we've had a few more people joining us recently. So this whole call is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch the replay of anything that you've missed. But welcome to everyone. Heidi, thank you so much. I had a great week-long experience in Saguaro National Park over a decade ago, and it still is a very warm place in my heart, and a sharp memory from when I actually grabbed the cholla cactus, and my son makes me tell him the story all the time.
You learn very quickly not to do that.
Yeah. But so, yeah, this is definitely where we want to open it up and have a conversation. So everyone, if you have specific questions that you can post them in the Q&A functionality here. That's at the bottom of the screen. Or there's enough of us here, it's a good number for really just opening up if you want to turn off come off of mute and just begin the conversation. I think it's really possible that we could really have it thriving that way today. So come on along.
Heidi, I just wanted to jump in and thank you for talking about desert ecosystems because I used to live in one for about 5 years teaching outdoor ed, and
Yeah.
the awe you experience in either a high desert, our more typical kinds of deserts like the saguaro deserts, we don't really think about just like the sheer amount of ecological activities that's happening there and all the interconnections. So I really appreciated you drawing our attention to a desert ecosystem. It's really, really great to see that.
So, Byron, where did you live?
Are you familiar with the John Day National Fossil Beds?
No.
They're a fossil bed that exists in Oregon. It's out towards the western
Ah,
part of, or sorry, like the central part of Oregon where Bend is. It's about 2 hours to the east of Bend and a little bit further north.
okay, okay. So it's kind of, is it sagebrushy where you're at?
Yep, it's technically considered the steppe if you look at it from the different types of ecosystems out there. But yeah, it's a sagebrush, juniper, treed. What's it? I'm trying to think of the English name. I can only think of the Latin name for the plants. But yeah,
Latin is
that's
welcome here,
essentially.
Byron. Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes have to switch from English and Latin because I always remember the biology kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, it was a very dry ecosystem with only trees being the junipers. So it was a very
Yeah.
interesting ecosystem to live within.
You know, it's so interesting that you talk about that deserts have so often been regarded as empty places. And I know a lot of people have written about this. Um, Certainly, you know, I was just recently in Las Vegas and thinking about like all the nuclear tests that had been carried out in the Mojave Desert, and you know, you can think about the way they viewed deserts as just sort of, you know, a product of the times. What just really, I think, surprised me is how many people I heard talking still to this day, talking about deserts as empty places, and now places that are you know, routinely paved over for things like you know, wind farms. Um, and there's just a sense that there is nothing there, nothing lives there. And as you say, when you take a closer look, you just understand the intricacy and the complexity of the relationships of the plants and animals that live there. And I think if you spend any time getting to know these places on the ground, you realize, you know, they're very abundant in life and not unoccupied.
Yeah, exactly. We used to do morning walks, and we would have students come by for about a week at a time, and you would get at least one morning walk a week if you wanted. And that was one of the times that we really were able to show some of that awe of nature because there might be something out that you might not notice, and we make sure all the kids are really aware of what we're trying to do and the experience that we're trying to create and being quiet and just really gaining a sense of place in that 45 minutes that we're going to have on a walk. So yeah, it's always great to share that with younger students to get them really invested in just settling into a space instead of just, you know, like paving it down like an adult might, or, you know, doing something that we ignore all of the activity in that area. We can actually take that time to really gain appreciation for that area.
And how old were your students? Were they K-12 students or?
Yep. Most of the
Yeah.
time. One time I was surprised by college students. I was told I was getting like middle school students, and I saw them like, oh, there's some really big kids. And then there were college kids. So every once in a while you get a much older group, but yeah, it was mostly K through 12.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Wow. Um, it just strikes me too that you know, awe is also generated by visiting the desert at different times of the year. I mean, for me, I am just awestruck when I go out into the desert, the Sonoran Desert behind my house here in Phoenix, and it'll be increasingly 110 degrees plus, and no shade to speak of largely, and these plants may not have had a good rainfall in a while. And you go, like, how do they survive this? Because we as humans, are out there only for a short period of time before we can run into some real issues with things like heat stroke. And it just amazes me that they persist, and they persist in below freezing temperatures. And there
And then
they
it's
are
not
doing their
just
thing.
completely different things. So you're like, well, humans can't, or like something that can survive out there is a saguaro cactus. We're nothing like a saguaro cactus. You're like, no, but you're an awful lot like a kangaroo rat, right?
Yep.
There's plenty of mammals there, or not, maybe not plenty, but there are mammals that are out surviving. There's reptiles, there's life of all forms that has adapted to this really harsh ecosystem,
Yeah.
and nobody does it alone. I love that image of the Palo Verde as the nurse tree, right? And saying like this is possible, or going into the roots with the bacteria and say nobody does this alone. That this is this teamwork that makes it possible. And how that's, in a big biomimicry themes kind of way, that's relevant in all ecosystems, and especially in these extreme ones. So when you had that slide up, I thought for the first time of how those little nodules of bacteria, right, are kind of comparable to the like chemosynthetic hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. So the complete opposite, right? This is baking in sunlight, dry as a bone, 100 degrees. And then you've got the bottom of the ocean, devoid of sunlight, freezing cold, and soaked, like literally underwater. And yet this idea of saying, well, I can get energy from somewhere, I can harness resources from somewhere, and that can cascade up with little bacteria can do it. Well, if the bacteria can do it, then the crabs can eat that. And if the crabs can eat that, and so it's one of these examples of life taking similar paths or taking a similar strategy in a completely different form.
Yes, yes. And what's so interesting too, Andrew, that I might add to that, I don't know how many of excuse me, how many of you have heard about the stress gradient hypothesis, which posits that these beneficial partnerships increase in systems that are particularly, abiotically stressed. So things like salt marshes, or high alpine environments, or deserts. And this idea of when plants and animals run into constraints, that it really helps to buddy up to survive and thrive in that environment. So there are tons of these kinds of beneficial partnerships in the Sonoran Desert that enable plants and animals to deal with, sparse and episodic rainfall, or these very wide fluctuations in temperature.
Yeah. I see Nancy has her hand raised.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I came in right at the end, so regrettably. So I apologize if this question kind of takes it somewhere you've already been. But so I work in the health sector, so I'm a health professional. So I'm always thinking about this, or intrigued by, like for example, when you're talking about leveraging scarcity to produce abundance. So right away my mind goes to, the people that I'm working with, the children that I'm working with, and how can we frame that in terms of the life lessons related from a biopsychosocial resilience perspective.
Yeah.
So creating healthy spaces, so body spaces, mind spaces, activity spaces, all of that. So I just wondered if you had kind of thought about it or put it, like distilled it right down into some of those little life lessons, even under that, just leveraging scarcity to produce abundance, something that, like, takeaways that are more metaphoric than in terms of applying to, say, my daily life and my, say, mental and physical health and well-being, but kind of neat and something to it.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're thinking about it in a much more of a social structure
Yeah.
kind of way, because um, what I think is so interesting, I hear this time and time and again from people these days, which is we should not have this scarcity mindset. That is a problem, and I feel like a scarcity mindset is very realistic because we are in a time of scarcity of all manner of things, funding, time, energy, resources. And so, how can we, face that honestly and talk about ways in which, for example, as the desert does, partnering up with
Yeah.
other entities to make abundance happen, as opposed to thinking, well, I need to have all the resources myself in order to go forward. So I'm curious, I throw it back to you. Have you thought of anything specific in the work that you do where this idea, this
Yeah.
guiding principle might help?
Yeah, I mean, I do. It's probably a whole other side conversation that I love to have with you at some point if you're interested. But no, I do think a lot about it, and I try to apply, particularly being someone who doesn't come from a background in biology or ecology. So sometimes I feel a little bit out of my depths that way, and not wanting to try to metaphorically apply something that really is, if you looked at it, falls short. So I'm always kind of cautious that way. But I mean, even when you were describing, is it Andrew? Sorry, Andrew. Is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
when you were talking about in a minute ago about under this whole thing about leveraging scarcity in the desert, you talked about, oh, I can, as if you're the different organisms, I can get energy from here, I can partner from here. So I with this other creature. And I think about that with the kids that I work with as well. A lot of what I'm doing relates to that. So the idea of, in situations where you're feeling well, scarcity, resource poor, learning to kind of look around you to what in your given context, even if the desert, and metaphorically, is where you find yourself, that actually there is a lot of potential in that desert. And then thinking about, being able to tell the stories of, the cacti and the relationships to the birds and all of that, and how that can kind of inspire thinking about, wait, where can I get under other energy sources? How can I partner? How can I build my my biopsychosocial resources through my connection to nature? So yeah, I give it a lot of thought. And then find myself excited when I hear. So when I'm hearing you and seeing your pictures, but just that I can't quite, when you give the examples, I can't keep up fast enough to try to translate it into a really simple story. And then I feel a little bit like, wait, now I have to replay it because wait, I'm getting sort of not having the technical language in the same way, in the way that I'd like to. Anyway, so
This is Nancy,
thank
this is
you. I
where
mean, I find it
AskNature,
inspiring.
yeah, this is where
Sorry.
AskNature comes into play for you. So, like all of these strategies and things that we're talking about, Heidi is actively putting these together as AskNature strategy pages, and we're collecting them, for the parks that she's doing them. So, like, I can actually show you now here, hot off the press. Actually, it's not even been pressed yet. Um, uh, yes, this way. Can you see this here? So this is
Yeah.
kind of in process. Heidi's first feature on Saguaro National Park, right? So leading with a picture to really just bring you in and blow your mind if you're picturing that, poor lonely cowboy skeleton leaned
Yeah.
up, and you get your eyes open and realize really what a desert can be. And then going in, and here it's pulling together those ideas, telling the overarching story, giving it all that context. And then this is where we'll have all of the individual features. So you see, we've even got placeholders now, and some existing pages that are relevant too, where it's all there.
Beautiful.
So here they
Yeah.
are as individual things to inspire you. Here's Heidi's contextualization of it. And then it's also totally open for you to draw new threads through them to find new things. And if you're not, that's a bad example. If you're not very familiar with AskNature and all the ways that it works, you can then always leap off to see something similar. So the cactus ribs keep them cool. This is amazing. Like that ridge shape actually allows it to catch these shadows. These shadows then make microclimates in between the fins that are cooler, and that just aids the cactus in a million ways that we won't get into now. This one is also available in Spanish. So the functions, you can see this is protecting from the loss of liquids or protecting from temperature. And you're like, that's the main thing that I'm looking for is temperature. And from there, then you can see all the pages on AskNature that relate to dealing with temperature, be it hot or cold or what. And you can also jump off from the pages to related organisms and say, yeah, this cactus is getting me. What else can plants teach me about? And you can see you give the breadcrumb there. So you're like, well, I want all plants. I really just want flowering plants. I really just want other cactus features, and that's the one that's live right now and tagged thus well that way. But so that's kind of how we've built that to be a tool to enable you to do that, to keep track of these ideas and build off of them and take it where you need to go.
Yeah, I love AskNature. I think it's phenomenal. It's wonderful.
Coming from my education background, Heidi, you said a couple of things. I think you talked about your frustration of what you call keyboard ecology. I experienced that a lot too, working with schools and students. We can't get the kids outside. We just can't. And so something that I see here and something that I'm excited about when you talk about awe of what really awes young people is maybe not the ecosystem, but a really wow, cool organism in the ecosystem. And that's the draw in. And so, Andrew, when we're just looking at the AskNature site, I think there were some great examples there that would pull kids in. But as you're developing that, maybe think about what would draw a young kid and go, wow, that's really cool. And then they would go deeper. So it may be thinking about that in the design.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in terms of the headlines too. Sometimes we've gone much more literal to be like, the more functional this is at a glance, the better. And then we're like, well, sometimes that can actually be a little bit inhibiting, and maybe the catchier we can make them. So we kind of have a few up there, and we try to compare them in our Google Analytics and see, what seems to be catching people most. But that's
And
great.
sometimes it's the grossest. Sometimes it's the grossest, the weirdest, strangest, and the headline, what I love is there's what is it? How the dung beetle, helps I don't remember the title, but when I said, well, the kids say, what's dung beetle? I said, what's dung? It's poop, and that brings them in. So that's the thing that'll catch their eye.
Slime seems like it would be also quite popular to lard into the mix. Anything slimy.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and kind of keeping with one of the earlier themes, just the extremities of just like that mind-blowing thing of like they can survive in this way, or they do it really harshly, like cactus spines. Everybody knows cactus spines are crazy and sharp, and why do they have that even? And like, just getting into that's really captivating stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'll join in here. I also have an education background, but more graduate school, not this, but have been an environmentalist all my life. Grew up in a solar heated home in Colorado and built in 1957. Anyway, what I'm thinking about is you focusing on the national parks, talking about all of the variety of biomimicry in different environments and how important it is for elementary school children really to get connected to this incredibly important, incredibly interesting subject. And so what I'm wondering is whether or not the national parks education programs kind of filter down into state parks, regional parks, and then connect into school systems. Because Nancy, what you were talking about, I want the example of talking about kind of a social structure within the natural world to create safe space, to create, whatever. Wouldn't it be cool if there was this basically a blueprint for schools to just pull in to their systems? I'm a substitute teacher now for my town after retiring from my educational profession, and how great it would be to have for me to bring that to the school system. And so I'm just wondering if that exists and what you think about that.
So let me understand your question. You're wondering if there are national park educational programs, curricula that filter down into like state park education and then into the schools?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know. I can't answer that. My guess is that from my experience, and again, this is really limited in this area, I think our parks are incredibly stressed and strapped for resources. And I have a sense that it's hard enough to meet, for national parks, for example, to meet the need within their own boundaries, much less be able to do outreach. And particularly now, I just got a news blurb the other day that seasonal workers in the national parks, their contracts will not be renewed coming up. And of course, permanent park staff are just freaking out because these seasonal workers provide, so much, bring so much richness and capacities to the national parks. So I don't know about that. I know that, from my experience, I had an experience as an artist in residence at a local high school here in Tempe, Arizona last year. And I had worked with students, about 158 students at various points throughout the school day in an art class. And we were focusing on seeds. I had organized an exhibition called Design to Move, Seeds That Float, Fly, or Hitchhike Through the Desert Southwest. So one of the things that we did is we got like 18 microscopes from the biology lab. A botanist at ASU supplied all manner of plant materials. I lectured on seeds and their dispersal strategies. The long and short of it is that I discovered the students were super interested in this. And telling you the truth, I was like a little worried about working with high schoolers because I've only done college age and graduate students because they're tough customers. But they said to me over and over and over again things like, I will never look at nature the same again, to see it through this lens of these plants are solving challenges in coming up with solutions in their own environments. And we can actually look to these solutions as inspiration for sustainable innovation. And that was like entirely new to them. And so I think any opportunity to bring a biomimicry lens into the classroom, just because, like our educators in the national parks or in our high schools, their teachers are really strapped for time, don't have a lot of time and opportunity or money to sort of get up to speed to educate themselves in these areas. So I think it's wonderful for those of us in biomimicry to step up and do volunteer work in these areas, in the national parks, or like you're doing in high schools, which is just great.
And that program that you just described, kind of packaged to be able to disseminate to various schools around the country, would be wonderful, would be amazing. And I'm wondering, I don't know your name, AskNature editor, but
Sorry,
but
I forget to change that sometimes.
that's okay.
So I did that too.
Your website that you're creating, what you just showed us, is incredible. And perhaps the organization here that we're all members of, and your website could be a resource for teachers, and that could be a way to disseminate these programs. Heidi, thank you. What you're doing is brilliant. So thank you.
Well, and thank you for coming out of retirement to teach again. Yay.
And I love the Sonora National Park, especially Sonora National Park East.
Yeah.
It's just so magical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of biomimicry related curriculum or activities that have been developed and are out there. I'm trying to think of the website, Teachers for Teachers. You go on there. There's an enormous amount of material that's available. I was also thinking of the National Wildlife Federation, although I don't know. At one point, I remember vaguely there was some conversation around biomimicry, but I don't know where that went. But and there's a lot of great educational material on AskNature already that you
Thank
can
you.
use as a resource. There's a whole page for educators.
This is a new idea for me, so I'll start doing research.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah, it is some great support material. And
Great.
feel free to reach out to me if you want
Thank
support
you.
in that area.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll put my email in here.
And Heidi, remember in some of our earlier conversations, that's kind of one of the things that we envisioned long term. We're like, as you're putting these together, there could be seeds of things that are then relevant to a lot of parks, and then from those parks kind of cascading out. So it's definitely something that's it's great to hear other brains thinking along those same lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the idea of the genius of place of each of these organisms would be a wonderful starting point.
Yeah.
I wonder if it struck me when you were talking about within the park system, everybody's strapped and resources are limited. Within the education system, resources are strapped, everyone's limited. So the opportunities for learning and just even taking yourself outside and inspiring that creativity are limited as well. But I wonder if there's a way of doing exactly what you're talking about in terms of the desert, the partnerships across those boundaries. So, for example, I have been thinking about why is it with social emotional learning in the school system, why is it that there isn't much, or doesn't seem to be much around nature-assisted social emotional learning, which may be an avenue for biomimicry? So, for example, if you know that teachers and school systems are really stressed over the lack of kids' behavioral issues with kids and self-regulation, difficulties with self-regulation in the classroom, well, I wonder if there's a way of bringing in social emotional learning skills that are nature guided. So nature assisted social emotional learning programs that are really about also inspiring people to learn from nature and then weaving into biomimicry. So it's social emotional learning, it's environmental education, it's biomimicry all in one, based on that opening of, here we have this problem, here's our functional problem in the school system, we've got all these behavioral issues, we got limited resources, why don't we ask nature in this context? We already have some social emotional learning programs, why don't we integrate biomimicry and integrate nature, the lens of nature, into those as a way of, you know, going across these boundaries and really developing collaborative partnerships. I may be taking that off into left field again, but we're stuck on the same thought of how you apply it that way. It's just
You really have my brain thinking right now, so I'm I'm gonna go back and look at some of those social emotional learning information.
And Nancy, I think you should create this movement. I really do.
It needs to be a little mini movement.
Yeah, you got it.
A little
You
mini
should do
movement
it.
on the back of. Yeah, exactly.
So Nancy, I'd love to add to that, just as a little anecdotal. I've spent some time teaching in K-6, and I also doing both physical fitness programs as well as science or STEM, and recently bringing biomimicry to this age group. And back in the day, before there's any formalization of biomimicry curriculum,
Yeah.
I used to, I really also, my favorite was teaching functional math. So having fun with math was the program I had. And when I would be a substitute teacher in some of these, like the first and second graders, and they were just getting to a point where they were just like whirling dervishes. They just couldn't concentrate. And, you know that point, right? They reached that point. And so I would just, in order to kind of reset, we would just go out to, we're very fortunate at my local elementary school. It's in the redwoods. And so we have an outdoor space. And so we're very fortunate to have like a track and field down in an area surrounded by these trees. And so we would just walk out and say, okay, we're going to just do a little math exercise, I would call it. And we'd go out, and I would just give them a challenge. Just said, how we're just going to take, we're going to move our bodies around this track and then return here. And the first step was, I'm going to challenge you to instead of, you can run, you can walk, you can, however you want to do it. I'm going to challenge you to see if you can actually skip the entire circle without smiling. And what they didn't even know what they were being, I mean, they're obviously, everybody wanted to do that, and they all think they could beat that challenge and make that challenge. But nobody was able to do an entire lap without smiling while they're skipping. And then the next phase was, okay, as you go around, notice something around you, and when you get back around, come back and report what that was, something you've noticed. It just took that. It took 5 minutes. We go back into the classroom, Well, I would say notice something, an organism, something that's alive and moving around you. It could be a blade of grass, it could be anything, or your neighbor. We go back into the classroom and beautifully complete our our activities. Everybody's back in their place, back able to focus. So it's always an example of, you don't even have to call it, let's go do some biomimicry. Let's go outside in nature. Let's connect. Let's move our bodies in a way, and then pause and notice something, right?
Yeah, I love that story.
So we are at about the hour mark, which is where we usually cap these. If we want to keep on going, everybody's welcome. If Heidi, if you have some more time and can stick around, welcome to keep up the conversation. I know some people were just joining us, so if you'd like to get in still and participate. But I'll say overall, thank you so much, Heidi, and everyone for being here. Our next event, next Friday, will be led by one of our Hive members, Vern Mangio. She'll be leading us in a discussion of Serviceberry, which is the latest book from Robin Wall Kimmerer. Really beautiful story and lesson about reciprocity and gift giving in the natural world, which is the same world as I always try to remember that. There's no natural world. There's no other world. We're all nature. So yeah, and then we'll be following up in March. Our live conversation will be with Carl Zimmer from the New York Times. He's got a new book, Airborne, all about the living things that are just floating around in the atmosphere itself. It stemmed out of all of the COVID reporting that he was doing, and just discovered how full of life the very air we breathe is. So it's really exciting, great stuff. So we're excited to be exploring that with him and with this community.